Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anupama, Professor at Department of Economics, Punjabi University, Patiala. I am going to talk about module Urban and Regional Planning from the global through national to local scale perspective from population, urbanization and poverty. So students, we are going to discuss about management of urban development at city, regional, national as well as global level so that every type of capital of urban citizens can be enhanced. The growth of urban areas offers new opportunities as well as challenges. The urban policy aims at maximizing the opportunities or the urban advantages and minimizing the risks and vulnerabilities of urban life. However, city is not a homogeneous entity. The opportunities and challenges of urban life differs from city to city depending upon its size, population, location and its contribution to regional, national and global economy. Therefore, the urban planning has to be tailored to the specific needs or the roles of the different cities in order to maximize their potential. In simple terms, the urban planning, that is, the planning of urban, merged urban regions, regional areas, cities and town planning is a technical and political process concerned with use of land and design of the urban environment including air and water and infrastructure passing into and out of urban areas such as transportation and distribution networks. So, this module aims to throw light on urban planning in global perspective, urban planning at the regional and national level, urban planning at the city level, urban planning for intellectual and social capital, urban planning for democratic capital, urban planning for cultural and leisure capital, urban planning for environmental capital, urban planning for technical capital and urban planning for financial capital. However, in economic context, the urban planning has much wider scope. Thus, urban planning is not merely an orderly, aesthetic and healthy layout of buildings and land uses or spatial distributions of human activities, but it also recognizes the importance of economic and political dimension of any urban area in planning decision. Cities are materialization of humanity's noblest ideas, ambitions and aspirations, but when not planned or governed properly can be the repository of society's ills. Cities drive national economies by creating wealth, enhancing social development and providing employment, but they can also be the breeding grounds of poverty, exclusion and environmental degradation. Thus, a coherent urban policy is always needed, and this policy should be in perfect tune with the regional and national goals. Planning for the city in this context, beyond the city's limit, poses another challenge to the policymakers. In many cities, national economic policies and investments are mostly the result of government decisions and budget allocations, and we know that in a globalized world, no national government pursues independent economic policies. The state, with its global and national goals, through its various institutional forms, exerts a critical influence on determining which cities and regions will benefit most from public resources. Governments also promote and or regulate private or public investments for the construction of infrastructure and other investments that contribute to urban development. Central governments in many countries are concentrating more attention and resources on particular city regions to redirect regional or national development. They are also using cities to connect to the global space of business and financial flows, while concretely using such cities to propel social change in particular directions. Thus, urban planning cannot be analyzed as an isolated policy of a specific area. For a holistic approach, it has to be looked from local to regional, national, and then to global perspective. The global perspective. Globalization has become the major debate of the last 10 years, which, with its strong economic impacts, has been engulfing the cities at a faster pace. The global restructuring also demands restructuring of the national as well as regional policies, which have their natural impact upon urban governance. Thus, at the city level, global restructuring also means restructuring of urban governance. Pressures on cities can be seen to operate in two dimensions. There are the pressures that are placed on cities in relation to their social and physical structures, such as major development projects, social polarization, or gentrification. Then there are the influences that are brought to bear on the decision-making processes. Clearly, these influences interact with each other. The physical and social changes take place within a political context. Decisions are being made on whether to promote certain projects and whether to undertake certain policies, and these will affect the degree to which the forces of globalization are accentuated, modified, or prevented. A major debate arises if, under the process of globalization, the role of the nation state is disappearing or remaining a dominant force or undergoing a process of restructuring in which there are shifts of roles both upwards to global or sub-global regional level or downwards. In consonance with global objectives, the city planners have to be conscious of international treaties, and environmental internationalism shapes the demand of local lobbies. For urban planning bodies, the issues like poverty, providing basic urban amenities, etc., have local pressure groups, while the environmental issues are global in character and therefore regulated by global agencies. Let us now discuss about the governance at the regional and national level. The urban governance through the national and regional governance bodies cannot be independent of global influences. International trade and regulatory organizations have grown in number and in influence. International regulation also has an important regional dimension. Global pressures in the North America, Europe, and East Asian regions are mediated to some extent by NAFTA, the EU, and ASEAN. This emergent regional policy has different degree of impact on city planning. In Europe, this is most developed, and in some aspects of regional treaties constrain local options. We can see decision rights being passed up to an international level and down to the subnational levels. On the other hand, international treaties are negotiated by the nation states, which again influence their decision-making process. Cities are penetrated by supranational forces and international decisions. Nation states, recognizing the economic importance of cities, have become more involved in promoting their urban assets. Rather than becoming weaker, Brenner argues that states are better seen as being reskilled. States have become denationalized with greater concern at supranational and subnational levels. We find supranational, national, regional, and local levels all involved in promoting the cities. An important point here is that we should see contemporary restructuring as having both economic and institutional dimensions. For many cities, processes of institutional change are incomplete. In the word cities, these processes of change may be particularly enhanced. The city level, like the national governments, the governance at the local or city level is not independent of the global political economy. A city-level economic and social change impact on civil society and political expression. Cities are increasingly dependent in their interaction with the global economy, but at the same time, to survive, they must have a solid relationship with their local society and its inherent interests. Thus, political mechanisms, democracy, and participation are also key aspects of city management. Pressures on planning come both from the need to integrate city economies with global forces and from the need to integrate fragmented interests within the city. City competition and the penetration of international institutions add to the challenges facing city leaders. We can now discuss about urban planning in a global economy. Many of the challenges and opportunities that are coming to define the early part of the 21st century are at their most visible in the cities in which a growing proportion of the world's population now lives. In response to the importance of cities in the global economy, the urban planning has to be adjusted accordingly. In the era of global competition, the planners are framing the policies that suit to the global as well as national business in consonance with the global agenda. For example, Millennium Development Goals. Therefore, the urban planners try to manage their local capital accordingly. Here, the term capital refers to the range of strategic assets and resources within a city. These assets and resources are shown in Table 1. In this table, we can see that the focus of intellectual and social capital is upon people and knowledge resources. That of democratic capital upon transparency, participation, and partnership, of cultural and layer capital on values, behaviors, and public expressions, of environmental capital upon natural resources, of technical capital on man-made capital and infrastructure, and that of financial capital on money and assets. All these components of capital are interrelated with each other, as shown in Figure 1. Seeing this interrelationship of various components of capital, the cities must be managed in a holistic and integrated way to successfully grow and develop cities in a sustainable manner. All these components are influenced by the global as well as national policies. These components are discussed here in their local, national, and global perspectives. The global economy is becoming truly integrated. Today's simultaneous global and local focus creates a new framework of ideas and opportunities. Global companies and economies work in local competition within global structures. On the other hand, the city governments are complex organizations that have to meet the needs of a great many different and sometimes competing stakeholders. To achieve their goal, they have to develop and adapt new organizational models and incorporate new information and communication technologies to help them manage change effectively. To become high-performing organizations, city governments must plan and in some cases transform their capabilities in line with the dynamic global environment in which they operate. Just how successful city governments are in meeting these challenges is largely dependent on how competent they are in managing internally the capitals of the city. Managing the capitals. Managing capital is an important task before the urban planners for optimizing the gains of urbanization and globalization and minimizing the threats for the same. Firstly, we can discuss the intellectual and social capital. A city's intellectual capital is a combination of its human and organizational capital. In the knowledge economy, human capital represents one of the most important sources of value. It provides knowledge, creativity, and the ability to innovate. Organizational capital refers to all non-human stocks of knowledge embedded in hardware, software, databases, and the concepts and values, organizational structures, and guiding principles of organizations or companies that support people's everyday work. Mapping and measuring intellectual capital provides valuable information about the skills and resources available within both government organizations and the general population. With this information, governments are better placed to take strategic decisions about their use of resources and to plan the economic growth of their cities and be competitive globally. Cities are engaged in a global competition for investment. The caliber, educational achievements, and the creativity of their citizens are therefore vital in each city's effort to attract new businesses and people to fuel their prosperity. A number of different factors influence a city's ability to grow and nurture its capabilities. These include, amongst many others, the welfare provision, the creation of formal and informal networks to exchange knowledge and ideas, knowledge management, policies to help immigrants to integrate as well as encouraging voluntary initiatives. We can easily understand that although the pressures of the planning for changes in intellectual and social capital are global, but the local governments seek the assistance of the national governments not only for funding of the related institutions but also for framing suitable policies that have universal standards. The lower tiers of the figure 2 show the importance of interaction of local and national governments in strengthening the intellectual capital of a city. These tiers include the social capital, innovation capital, and the process capital. Here, social capital comprises both formal and informal social networks, including the interaction among citizens, and social connectivity. Process capital involves both human and organizational capital. It is process capital that makes the most of the investment made in social capital. Innovation capital refers to how the city renews and adapts its human and organizational capital to the demands of the rapidly changing global economic environment. The nature of the interaction between these three capitals will determine the strength and extent of human and organizational capital present in any organization or city, which in turn will determine the overall level of intellectual capital. Intellectual capital has a significant impact on productivity and competitiveness of cities and regions, and nation as a whole. Cities explicitly recognize this and have developed policies that are designed to improve their competitive position. The democratic capital. City administrations need to improve their accountability and the transparency of their dialogue with citizens in order to achieve the commitment of the whole city on its journey into the future. Under globalization, the city governments, like other political entities, are faced with the challenge of declining participation in the democratic process. To renew the interest and activity of their citizens, cities have to develop ways to make themselves more accountable, increase the transparency of their decision making, and engage citizens directly in the creation of policies and decisions. Developing accountability is a key aspect to the strategies that cities are adopting to engage their citizens. They are doing this by disclosing their own targets and recording their performance against them. By creating collaborative forums with specific interest groups, for example business, and by arranging their services around the needs of their citizens. Three major trends are emerging that, taken together, provide city governments with the tools to bring all the players in a city's future together. These are the drive for greater transparency and better communication, the creation of new forms of democratic participation, and the development of partnerships between private and public sector and citizens. The global capital as well as the multilateral agencies always pressurize the national governments to ensure transparency. For this, freedom of information is very important. Information is required not only on the procedures of approvals and disapprovals for the external investors, but also for the local citizens who are always concerned with the collection and expenditure of public money. For adequate transparency and partnership of different stakeholders in urban planning, the tasks and responsibilities need to be allocated not only between the three elements but also between the different levels of government from the local to the national levels. Cultural and layer capital. Cities today seek to create their own unique identity and to build and develop the experiences that they offer to visitors and residents alike. Cultural and leisure facilities go beyond art galleries, opera houses, or museums. Today's cities make a virtue of their atmosphere, their heritage, and nightlife. But more than this, they develop an intangible quality of creativity and innovation. There are various strategies that cities can pursue in building their store of cultural and leisure capital. In successful cities, culture and business come together. Forward-looking, dynamic cities capitalize on their appeal to both visitors and potential residents and businesses as good places to live, work, and invest. Global attractions can put a city on the map, and a sporting or cultural event can act as a magnet. For example, Barcelona Olympics that propelled the city on the world stage. It also draws the world's attention. But a city cannot rely only on single attractions or events. It has to use these as a starting point for the beginning of a much longer journey. In this respect, there are some critical questions in front of the urban planners. They need to consider what will attract the attention of the world to their city, and more importantly, what will keep it there. The environmental capital. The quality of life that a city offers is a fundamental aspect of its ability to prosper. Offering citizens a clean, green, safe, and attractive environment is high on the list of priorities for city planners. Balancing economic development with environmental impact is a significant challenge. Pollution in all its forms is a major problem for many cities, and so city governments have to develop policies that incorporate economic and environmental considerations. Developing policies for sustainable development necessitates a joined-up approach to decision making. This means that environmental considerations are an integral part of policy development across the wide spectrum of city government. Planning, transport, finance, and economic policies all need to reflect the environmental goals that a city sets for itself. But these goals cannot be achieved by a single city in isolation of other cities and national and global policies. A city's environmental capital is closely connected to local, national, and international spatial and social policies. Coordinating the planning process of city governments is also a major challenge. Strategic business plans, spatial and long-term financial plans need to be aligned and implemented in a coordinated way. This needs citizen partnership, public-private partnership, and technical and financial assistance from both the national and international platforms. Technical capital. The enormous complexity of cities today means that the demand on their infrastructure are relentlessly challenging. Not only the basic needs of transport, housing, water, and energy are under strain, but new demands for effective communication make the supply of, for example, broadband and electronic networks an increasingly important element of infrastructure provision. To cope with these challenges, many cities are adopting an integrated approach to their urban planning. Rather than planning for the separate provision of transport and housing, for example, a more holistic view is being adopted that seeks to measure the combined impacts of different types of development. This integrated approach also means that cities are looking to establish partnerships and few governments of collaboration that allow them to deliver infrastructure requirements in new ways. Public-private partnerships to deliver infrastructure are now a common feature of many cities and allow city governments to share the risks of provision with partners from the private sector. International collaborations are also being sought by many of the national governments on behalf of the cities. The pressure on cities to operate more efficiently and at the same time improve their services to citizens is increasingly responded to by the adoption of technological solutions, improving processes and workflows within the city administration itself is a key focus for many cities. The key components of technical capital can be observed from figure 5. The figure shows that technical capital has much wider arena. It is not only restricted to the urban infrastructure but also includes organizational capital and a complete network of information system that links the city with citizens and national as well as global businesses. Citizens now expect fast, responsive service from government and want to be able to transact their dealings with the city online efficiently and effectively. Businesses are attracted to cities that offer them sophisticated communications infrastructure along with efficient transport and logistics. In combination, these pressures mean that cities have to find new ways to develop their infrastructure in an integrated way. They have to develop new partnerships, collaborations, and ways of working that can help them to deliver infrastructure solutions that are efficient, environmentally sustainable, and cost-effective. Financial capital. Cities face a number of common financial challenges. Budgets are under intense pressure from a host of competing demands. At the same time, citizens demand better services but are reluctant to pay more for them. The familiar dilemma of having to do more with less is one that all the cities are facing. In order to respond to this challenge, cities have to do a number of things. They have to establish accounting policies and analysis that allow them to understand their financial position and introduce financial disciplines and performance management methodologies based on these findings. Cities need to adopt an entrepreneurial approach to the way that they finance and provide services. They need to understand the true cost of the services and products that they supply in order to evaluate whether alternative provision such as shared services may be more efficient. Some cities may be more efficient in certain areas than others. They should seek opportunities to trade with other cities, selling those services that they perform most efficiently and buying in those where it makes financial sense to do so. New forms of partnerships are also critical. Many city authorities are discovering the advantages of working with the private sector to fund the provision of services and infrastructure in innovative ways. Taken together, the demands on cities' finances call for planning that sets out the goals and tasks that the city wishes to achieve and establishes how the funding and investment they require can be most effectively put in place. By consulting and examining the experience of others, they will be able to begin developing the financial structures that will allow them to meet their present and future needs. The cities also get some finances from the central pools. The national governments allocate funds to the cities according to their macro goals of locating a business and optimal utilization of given resources with optimization of externalities of putting money in a specific city. The international financial institutions may also help the urban governments for meeting their needs. For example, providing housing, safe water, sanitation facilities, and universalization of education, etc. These are some of the global goals for which the cities can mobilize money from international financial institutions. In this case, the role of civil society organizations assumes greater importance because all the funding agencies, for example, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, are now increasingly relying upon the civil society organizations for funding the national projects. So students, let us summarize what we have learned from this module. To sum up, it can be stated that today no city is exempted from the challenges that globalization has created. Rather, the national governments have to dictate terms to the cities for making any plan that fits in national framework which is further guided by global development. Thus, there is no exaggeration in saying that the urban planning is guided at the global level, who works through the national or regional governments. However, it must be kept in mind that the processes of globalization today are unavoidable. Therefore, any efficient urban planning should aim at managing the capital of the city for optimizing the gains that are imposed on urban planning by global players through national and the regional governments. That's all for today's lecture. I hope you must have enjoyed it. Thank you.